Unfortunately, after that prison term, by 1982, he had landed himself in a cult in South Florida. And like lots of cults, the one that Robert Rozier found himself in the Miami area in the early 1980s, it was headed up by a guy who proclaimed himself to be the Messiah. He called himself Lord, Son of the Lord. He called himself Yahweh Ben Yahweh.
Brother
and in the Miami area, specifically in Miami Gardens in Carroll City,
Leona
Yahweh
Mitchell.
Ben Yahweh and his cult, they actually built themselves up into a little bit of an empire. They were kind of
Leona Mitchell is still
fixed
alive.
up decrepit housing.
But that was her
brother. They built themselves a big headquarters. They ran Bible study and homeschool for kids out of their big compound. They ran a bunch of different businesses. They had buses and vehicles and trucks. They even made products. There was apparently Yahweh beer and Yahweh soda and Yahweh hair products. Behold, the Yahweh ice cream from the time. And even though the Yahweh Ben Yahweh thing, it really was a cult, really was run by a guy who said he was God, they did do some good in their community, and they got some positive attention for the good things that they did in their community. Yahweh Ben Yahweh was invited to address a group of Miami business leaders at one point in the 1980s, and they might have forgotten he was a cult leader, and might have thought of him as just a community leader, until he got up and told them, quote, Egypt has her pyramids, India has her Taj Mahal, France has her Eiffel Tower, Miami has me. Miami, he said, has the Son of Yahweh. The world's greatest attraction is here in your midst. I'm here. By October of 1990, the mayor of Miami actually proclaimed Yahweh Ben Yahweh Day for the city of Miami in recognition for this cult leader's accomplishments, for what his cult had done that was good for the city of Miami. Sadly, within a month of Yahweh Ben Yahweh Day being proclaimed in Miami, within a month of that was October 1990, by November 1990, the whole thing had actually turned into a horror movie. On November 7th, 1990, happened to be the day after Election Day that year, Yahweh Ben Yahweh himself, this cult leader, and 15 of his followers were all indicted on horrific charges. A whole litany of charges, including racketeering and violent crime. This is a case that had been a long time coming. But the centerpiece of their indictment was conspiracy to murder 14 different people. The cult was blamed for 14 different deaths. At trial, there was testimony that in order to become part of the inner circle of this cult in Miami in the 80s, the cult leader, Yahweh Ben Yahweh, he demanded a sort of entrance fee to get into the inner circle. The entrance fee was you had to kill a white person and bring Yahweh Ben Yahweh either that white person's severed head, or if you couldn't manage the severed head, you at least had to bring him an ear. And that's how he'd let you into the inner circle of his cult. Robert Rozier, who'd had that promising football career at Cal and in the NFL, at that trial, he confessed to taking part in 7 murders for the cult. At the end of that trial, Yahweh Ben Yahweh and most of the other people who were put on trial with him were convicted of various crimes. And the Yahweh cult in South Florida is still famous to this day because of the number of people that they killed, right? They were a black supremacist, serial killing death cult that was really visible in Miami, and for a time it held sway over some portions of some neighborhoods in the city of Miami, but then it all quickly unraveled into this incredibly gruesome serial killer story. And the story itself, as a story, it was amazing. The Miami Herald in 1991, they won the Pulitzer Prize for a series of more than 80 articles that they did on the Yahweh Ben Yahweh cult. The Miami Herald tracked down defectors from the cult. They ultimately tracked down documentation that linked the cult leader and the cult members to the 14 different deaths that the cult was associated with that ultimately got them all charged. It was incredible reporting for the Miami Herald. Nowadays, it's the Miami New Times, the alternative weekly in Miami, that has sort of taken up the baton on Yahweh Ben Yahweh death cult reporting. And their angle on it now, the reason they've had to take that up now in 2016, is because this year, the Miami New Times has taken it upon themselves to remind everybody about this serial murdering black supremacist Miami death cult from the early 90s. whenever this guy shows up, see the guy with the sign there, Blacks for Trump? Whenever that guy shows up at a Donald Trump rally, that guy there, you have seen that guy with the Blacks for Trump sign, gods2.com at Donald Trump rallies. You've seen him going back for a few months now. Trump event organizers seem to go out of their way to put that guy, the guy with his Blacks for Trump sign, they seem to go out of their way to put him in camera view when Trump is speaking. And he's been there, and they've put him right behind Trump in camera view at multiple events over the course of the campaign. We also, I kid you not, at one point we had Trump himself grab the guy's sign and hold it up himself. He held up a Women for Trump sign and kissed it, and then he held up the Blacks for Trump sign that he got from the guy in the crowd. Today in Miami, Donald Trump singled out the guy holding the Blacks for Trump sign, singled him out a couple different times to say how much he loved him.
Thank you. I love that sign, Blacks for Trump. I love that sign. Thank you. Thank you, fellas. That's so good. Blacks for Trump. That's so nice.
The guy who himself is most often the person you can see holding that sign, the guy who we saw get up there and hold that sign behind Trump. He has gone by a few names over the years. He now likes to be known as Michael the Black Man, but he is one of the Yahweh Ben Yahweh cult members who was indicted on the conspiracy to murder charges in Miami back in the day. The guy holding the Blacks for Trump sign, who you've seen, that guy there, who you've seen at so many Trump rallies, who the Trump organizers keep putting right behind Trump at his rallies, he was charged with 2 murders in the Yahweh Ben Yahweh serial murder trial in Miami back in the day. Ultimately, he was not convicted, but the Miami New Times keeps pointing out that this is his past every time he turns up at one of these Trump's events, particularly when he gets personally shouted out by Donald Trump. And oftentimes held up by the conservative media as a sign of real black support for Donald Trump. They keep pointing him out, pointing out his signs, because it's basically their contention that the Miami New Times, it's basically their contention that what this guy, Michael the Black Man, is trying to do is he's trying to reconstitute the Yahweh Ben Yahweh cult. He has always maintained that Yahweh Ben Yahweh was robbed in that trial, that the cult did nothing wrong. And he is seemingly trying to build his own following as a religious leader. The website that's advertised underneath Blacks for Trump, that's a sort of semi-religious website that he is advertising there, that he maintains himself on the bottom of his Blacks for Trump signs. Michael the Black Man himself declared, I should tell you, his own run for president last fall. Back in September, he said he was running for president this year. And the reason Republican campaigns, including Donald Trump's, have been so willing to put him on camera, the reason that politicians like Rick Santorum have even had Michael the Black Man open up for Rick Santorum at a South Florida political event, the reason they're willing to give him so much attention is because part of his insane cult-like theology is how much he hates Democrats and how Democrats are the devil. Incidentally, he also says that Barack Obama is a member of the Ku Klux Klan. But his theology, his sort of bizarre cultish theology, has now morphed this year into him loving Donald Trump and going to all the Donald Trump rallies. But the partisan appeal of him holding up that sign that says Blacks for Trump, that partisan appeal of that message has been so attractive to Republicans and to the Trump campaign in particular that I think they've been willing to let this guy get on stage and advertise his website and get all this attention from the candidate and all the rest without asking too many questions about who exactly he is and why exactly he's there. And that is probably wise, because here is what happens when you do ask him those questions.
Owen Schroyer from Infowars.com, and I'm here with Michael, the Black Man on the radio. Now, let's get a quick look at his shirt here real quick. There's the shirt he is repping tonight. Now, Michael, tell me why you're wearing this shirt.
I'm wearing this to show my support for Donald Trump and my disdain for Hillary Clinton, who is actually the financier of slavery, because everybody, what do you mean by she's a financier? Her name is Hillary Rodham Clinton, and they're supposed to be the descendants of Rothschild. In fact, her biggest donor is Lynn Rothschild, and of course Rothschild, Rockefeller, and J.P. Morgan are the financiers of slavery.
He's for Trump, and he's against Hillary Clinton because of the way you spell the word Rodham. Shows her to be a descendant of Rothschild. But if you really want to know if you really want to know the philosophy behind Blacks for Trump, this guy who you see at all the Trump events, including today's Trump Miami rally, the real heart of Blacks for Trump and why he wears those shirts that say Trump and Republicans are not racist. If you really want to get to the heart of why he believes it, well, here in his own words is his own real explanation.
We are the true Hebrews, and we're the chosen ones of God. And don't let them trick you to think you some damn caveman that was living in the rocks in the side of the mountains. The people who were living in the rocks in the side of the mountains, Hillary Clinton and those Canaanites.
And her supporters?
Yeah, no, not just the supporters. It's a group that's actually called the Canaanites that you've seen in the nightclub with the black fingernails, and they're really white with the blue veins. They even call themselves blue bloods. These guys are cursed with the curse. We call it albinoism because they got that little trait, the little cross-eyed part, and they never come out in the daytime. These people are the Canaanites that were cursed, but then they married into Ishmael in Genesis chapter 36 and created an organization called the Hyksos, and the Hyksos became called the Egyptians. Egyptians became called the Philistines. Philistines became called the Babylonians. The Babylonians became called the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians became called the Khazars and the Israeli. And today they're called the Illuminati.
Oh, it's the Illuminati. The guys in the nightclubs with the fingernails.
Oh, shit.
Even the reporter from the conspiracy theory website Infowars is
Infowars.
like getting a little too much.
It's like, goddamn, get me away from this Negro.
Who was once indicted as part of the Yahweh Ben Yahweh death cult for multiple murders. But the Trump campaign keeps putting him front and center at Trump rallies. As recently as today, they've got him front and center at Trump rallies. They've got Donald Trump shouting him out, thanking him for his support, pointing him out at Trump events. This is the first presidential election since we've had an African-American president in this country. It is hard. It would have been hard to foresee, I think, when we were electing our first African-American president, that this is how one of the two major parties would be handling racial politics and what he perceives to be the core of his support in the African-American community this late in the presidential race to succeed our first African-American president. But that is where we are at. Tonight is also the night that Republican U.S. Senate candidate David Duke, the former Grand Lizard of the Ku Klux Klan, qualified to appear in an official candidates debate in the Senate race in Louisiana. David Duke, Republican candidate, was among 6 U.S. Senate candidates who are polling high enough in Louisiana now to make the stage for tonight's debate, which was held, I'm sad to say, at Dillard University, which is a black college in New Orleans. Dillard, of course, agreed out of the kindness of their heart to be a host for the Louisiana Senate debate. At the outset of the campaign, they had no idea that would ultimately involve an invitation to the nation's best-known and best self-promoting Klansman and white supremacist. Dillard did go ahead with hosting this debate tonight, though, including David Duke. It just wrapped up within the last few minutes. Dillard, in its infinite wisdom, they did decide that tonight's debate would be held in front of an empty room. They held it in an auditorium, but they did not convene an audience for David Duke and the other Senate candidates tonight. I should tell you there were plenty of protesters at Dillard tonight who would have been very happy to get themselves in there had they been let in, but they were not let in. There are some reports that protesters outside the debate tonight were tear gassed by police.